You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries. This is a podcast about Shadowdark and occasionally other role-playing games, where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss luck. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Matt, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Jody. You feeling lucky, punk?
No. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Let me see if I got a quarter in my pocket.
There you go. So today's episode focuses on luck. And so, Jody, why don't you take us to the table?
I am happy to. So we are kicking off what I'm affectionately referring to as Saltmarsh Saturdays, my own somewhat Forgotten Realms, somewhat literally just stealing anything I like and cramming it on in there because there wasn't enough there in the first place. And we're kicking off that campaign. We are underway. Sessions have been played. Here we go. Now, worth noting here is one of the calls I made when I figured out which versions of things, because there are some recommended versions for Shadowdark of different ways you can play pulp mode, grinder mode, blitz mode, whatever it is. And I am actually using the grinder mode, which limits your recovery a little bit and limits your spell recovery a little bit. And one of the maybe biggest departures I've taken is that in addition to that, I'm also not starting every session with everybody getting a luck token. If you're a level 1 character, you begin with some luck. After that, you're kind of on your own. There's enough classes out there with bards and priests and whatever else that can generate them. So, I'm like, yeah, well, just let them do it. But, usually the storyteller here, we try and come up with a specific table moment. And I haven't had like anything tangible come up where it's like bit anybody in the butt yet.
Excuse me. You seem to not have an idea. Do you mind do you mind?
Go. Apparently not. Go ahead.
I'm butting in. I'm interrupting because I am furious. It is unconscionable that I get to play so infrequently that now I must sit at a table with a wizard and experience grinder mode without the luck tokens to buoy me. I have a specific instance where this thing came up, and I'm going to take you through it, Jody. I have this incredibly powerful magic wand that has Pillar of Salt attached to it, or Pillar of Stone in this case. And I was going to cast it on a big baddie. And I spent multiple turns thinking and then deciding not to use it because I didn't have a luck token. And if I would have had a luck token, I would have been way cooler, way sooner. And you, sir, have taken my coolness away. How dare you? How dare you? All right, folks, let us gather around the fire and discuss me, and my lack of luck tokens. Jody, I'm going to start right off the bat with saying, why did you kind of talked about this, but why did you decide to deprive players of their precious, precious luck? What about specifically playing Shadowdark for so long has led you to this this decision that you have made?
Well, since we're dealing in such hyperbole for this episode, I've just totally soured on the luck tokens. I think they're bad. It's the mechanic of Shadowdark that I actually don't like anymore. I kind of wish they weren't there. Advantage is enough. Like, it's too easy. No. That is a very exaggerated version of actually answering the question. The actual answer is I have gotten to a point now that I've seen higher level characters. We have a fair amount of experience with characters who are in the second half of their adventuring life, at least in terms of levels. They are in levels 6 and up. Luck tokens are relatively accessible, and you don't have to get to 6th level before luck tokens are accessible. if you have bards in your party, if you have priests in your party, you pretty quickly can generate them. And it's just, they're available, they're around. And it also increases the value of those character types or classes. So that was one of my reasons. Another reason is much more grounded in the narrative I want rather than a mechanical specificity. The narrative I want is a frontier exploration world where getting tired and feeling worn down is a part of your adventuring experience. That the notion of, in a campaign that is based on a points of light concept, that there are hubs of civilization and safety, and you are moving from hub to hub to hub, there needs to be resources that are strained by going from hub to hub to hub. If you always have rerolls in your pocket, that feeling to me is diminished. That heightening that I've felt both as a player and as a GM of when the party is low on luck tokens and they are a very limited commodity, there is a different vibe. There's just a different feeling at the table, and I wanted that to be more prevalent. I also wanted the ability to use luck tokens as a GM resource. So those were kind of my reasons actually for limiting them. That, and I mean, it's well documented that I hate fun. So,
well, okay. So I'm gonna bring it down from the level of hyperbole we have previously been at, and I know I took us there. So I'm gonna bring us back. So pragmatically, I get it. I understand. I am going to stay in the skeptic category for a little while, because I think deep down as a player, I am maybe a little skeptical for a couple of reasons, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. Luck is a specific mechanic that is meant, at least per the rules as written, is meant to be a meta rule. We talked a lot about this when we discussed the torch timer as kind of the other, meta currency or what have you. And luck is a meta currency, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with your character if you get it at the start of a session, right? Because you could be in the middle of a dungeon and suddenly you have a luck because you just happened to stop and start a session, right?
Right.
Well, I've always felt that was narratively unsatisfying. And I think you have too. We've had conversations about that lead me to believe that is the truth. However, there is a genuine sense of an arc, and we've talked about this too, that if everyone starts with a luck token at the table, there's an arc to the session where at the beginning of the session, so much possibility. And then by the end of the session, we usually play for about 4 or 5 hours, not so much possibility, and the stakes have been raised. What do you feel like you're going to lose something in starting from a place of scarcity and starting from a place of, frankly, characters being more reserved?
No.
Well, I guess, okay, so, and why? Jeez. Okay, next question.
Next question. No, and here, the why is perhaps a faulty logic. But much like the fast start, or I'm going to run a dungeon and we begin playing with a one-shot adventure and we begin playing at the door of the adventure, at the door of the dungeon. How do we get here? We don't care. Do we have gold? We don't care. We're just get in the dungeon. Let's go. Well, that arc of we're super heroic and we can cash in our luck tokens and do our whatevers, and we've got bailouts in our back pocket and we can try silly things of, let's just heighten that tension right away and see where we go. Yeah, let's just spike that like sense. Right now. Let's make it exciting now. Let's put failure on the table now. And I'm willing to own that as a GM. And I don't think that point, I think it would be irresponsible to have this discussion and not make that point, that I also am aware of the risks I'm taking with your characters.
Yeah, and so again, staying in this skeptical place where I don't actually think I am, but just because it's interesting for the discussion, my follow-up to that would be, okay, so, you're willing to take on this responsibility of kind of understanding that the stakes have been raised from the beginning. Mm-hmm. As we sort of started playing, I felt that the lack of luck tokens actually wasn't that big of a deal. However, we don't have a priest in the party, and we don't have a bard. And so we have no way of generating luck tokens. So that's number one. Number two, we don't really have a resource for healing other than our ranger, which is not a consistent source of healing. I'm wondering if it kind of punishes certain party compositions in a way that if we, like if I had known, and I'm just going to own that this is me using my kind of min-maxy player brain and letting it kind of creep in to maybe a place that I'm not super comfortable with, but I'm comfortable admitting it just to you. No one else will hear this. The part of me that I don't maybe want to admit exists is that if you would have told us before the game in more explicit terms, before I had chosen to play this character, like I had read that we didn't start with a luck token unless we were at level 1 or whatever. I don't think I'd fully internalized it, but because you gave us your house rules prior. But I probably, if I'd known better about the party composition and wasn't kind of already locked in and in the mindset of playing a wizard, I would have chosen to play a priest, to have access to bless and to have access to cure wounds. And not having a priest in the party and not having a bard and not having access to luck tokens, do you feel like that might then sway the choice and selection for new players coming in with new characters?
It may, and I don't think in a negative way. I think we've seen in our Sunday sessions where it's just go to the dungeon, get loot, come back, that balanced party composition is a regular discussion, and it does sway people to be like, hey, we need a blank. Can somebody play a blank? And if nobody has oftentimes, priest, that somebody will play one. Somebody will create one. Somebody will go, oh, yep, I've got do we have a priest player? So that's not new to me. And then the other piece is wanting to run more of a sandbox style game with some time record keeping and wanting to encourage players to have a stable of characters. This, I think, also adds to that. So again, it's not necessarily a punishment or a negative penalty that I see. It's reinforcing the narrative of the world. And then also that, yeah, adventurers as an idea in a concept in a living world, you would have different classes because you need different specialists for different things. Just like a party without a fighter is a interesting choice.
Well, okay. So first of all, we should be very specific and careful here, because I think that my question dovetails with the fact that we allow an array to be rolled, right? Mm-hmm. So we 3d6, we do not do down the line. We allow an array and then place where you want. So that allows a certain amount of choice that I think is also baked into my concern. So just also to call that out.
We use the optional rule of if you don't have a 14 somewhere, yeah, you're gonna have viable stats,
totally,
for your class,
exactly, and that allows some choice in class, and so. My follow-up question was going to be, what about 3d6 down the line? And do you think that might actually mitigate some of this? But that we're getting kind of far afield from luck. And I want to actually take off my skeptical hat, because I actually don't think that I'm particularly skeptical about this. I think it's pretty cool. But I think one thing I want to talk about in terms of luck is I want, and maybe you can't think of something off the top of your head, but are there any examples? I gave you kind of an example. We can get back to the top of the show. Are there any examples of when you've seen luck undermine the narrative or undermine what you're looking for? And not calling out a player or calling out any sort of like whatever, but what parts of this did you wanted to reduce the amount of luck in the game? Where do you see it hindering other than providing you with the setting narrative, right? Are there any places where you've seen it actually inherently like undermine the situations present in the game?
Yeah, and it's a mechanical unsatisfaction that I've had, or dissatisfaction is how words work, is that, and it's actually come up in a few different, we've seen it on the Discord, it's been on the Facebook, it's a discussion point that does come up when you've been playing for a little bit, that if you give, at the beginning of the session, everybody gets a luck token go, which I think is a pretty standard way of doing things, is then there's a sense if you're playing the fighter or if you are playing a thief, and you don't cast spells, you should probably hang on to your luck tokens. And you should probably give them to the spellcasters when they need them and share them with them and let them re-roll a miscast or re-roll their failed at casting attempt at a cure wounds, and like giving them those, you hold on to them. And I found that I wasn't able to come up with a good answer to that. I looked at, you can't share luck tokens, but there are now some classes that frankly directly contradict that notion.
Sure.
So that's not viable. Without like starting to trickle down, rewrite, and change. And I'm trying to pull back on that from what I already do a lot of. So I wasn't satisfied with that. And what was happening is players would want to do cool things and then would either talk themselves out of it because they didn't have a luck token, or they, quote, didn't want to waste their luck token. Yeah. And I really found that, like, again, it was a meta discussion that was away from the game. It was away from the reality of the world. It was, we are now talking as players playing a game. We aren't talking as our characters. We aren't in game. Also, wanting that to be a valuable in-world resource that is just something that I haven't had a chance to pull at those threads in the game world yet.
Well,
with
one
you
of them
guys.
came up, and I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really cool because you did have a scene. I want you to describe this. There was a scene in our last game where a player was bestowed a luck token from the Fae, right? I mean, like it happened, I think, off a random table.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a cool moment. And then also, it's just worth noting that you are allowing these luck tokens to persist from session to session with their character.
Right.
Are you not? Yeah.
So you'll have a little luck box, on your sheet, and you yes or no. I mean, it's on or off because you can only ever have one. You can't stack them. So this moment was pretty cool. I use a random travel table most of the time. And we're doing some hex crawling, and we use the crawling clock mechanic, and I've crossed that over into the way I'm running hex crawling, and so far so good. To future us, maybe we'll discuss that. But there was a random roll where, there was an interaction with a fairy circle. I think of kind of traditional our world mythology of fairy circle, and it was a fairy circle. It was great because it was an elven ranger, and I was able to just really play into that narrative. And there was you can choose to interact or you can choose not to interact. And do you make an offering? And as an elven ranger, I was like, you're going to know a ton about this right off the top. I also think I had them make a check to see what they knew about it, and they rolled lights out. And so, which everybody did that session. Now I remember
everyone, including you.
Yeah, it was nonstop great rolling. It was a very strange example of what happens if everybody does roll well all the time. It is a interesting flavor of game, but yeah. And then so this elf decided to give the fairies a very generous offering of a beautiful piece of jewelry, and they thought that was dope, and they gave him a luck token and said, "Hey, you have our blessing. See you later, buddy." And he came stumbling out later after you'd all been feverishly working away to build a boat. And he came back. I was like, the boat's done. You want to go?
Oh, man.
And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. One of the wants I have, without, spoiling too much of the surprise, but I want religion to be a big deal in my world, because in a world where, you don't have to imagine what if there were gods, but people go, "Hey, God, can I have clean water?" And God goes, "Yes." I think that would change people's perception of things. And so, "Hey, God, can I have a lucky blessing?" "Yes, you can," is just a thing that's around. So, right. Opening up that means of players being encouraged to access the world and do those kinds of things and to poke at those edges and encourage players to go, "Oh, maybe there is a way to gain favor here. Maybe there is a way to leverage an advantage here. Maybe there is," rather than it just being a meta currency was part of that. And yeah, in that case, it was just a random table roll of, "Hey, this is what happened to be in this place, and it suited well, and it played out." But that's a great example, and thank you for reminding me, is that wanting the world to generate them for you. Or if somebody does something super rad, being able to say, "I'm going to just give you advantage on this because that's freaking cool." Where if there's luck tokens out there, I honestly don't do that. Like, I really avoid doing that unless it's super bespoke to the person's background or their class.
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about luck tokens, just like you have. We've had a lot of conversations about them over the years now. And So I'm really happy that you're trying this. This is like a great, experiment in terms of being a player and a GM that we can kind of compare notes. And thus far, I wanted to say that, like, again, in my melodrama at the beginning of the show, I was kind of giving you a hard time. Here is from a player's perspective and somebody who was playing a wizard. Here is my thought process and what your decision making made me do that I thought was kind of interesting and probably generated the kind of thinking and the kind of situation that you were hoping for, which is that I tried to cast, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I tried to cast as few spells as possible. Like I only ever cast a spell either when it was magic missile because I had advantage on it, and it was very likely that it was very likely I was not going to roll a 1. Mm-hmm. Right? And I only ever cast a spell when absolutely necessary. And so the example I gave at the top of the program was this wand I have that has the tier 4 spell Pillar of Salt, which in the context of this particular wand is Pillar of Stone. And it has the ability to turn a monster or whatever to stone. And what was interesting about that is I looked at it a couple of times and knew that there was some big, terrible, horrible monster coming. And I thought, unless this is absolutely a potential TPK, I'm not going to use this because I could just blow myself up on a 1. Mm-hmm. And
everybody else.
And that leads me to my next point, which is something that both you and I have adopted, which is you cannot re-roll a natural 1 using a luck token. Mm-hmm. However, you can spend a luck token to change that crit fail into a regular failure. And I don't know where you are on this, but it's a little clunky. It's a little clunky, especially doing it mid-campaign in our Dolmenwood game. And I think sometimes players still forget and maybe reroll a 1 without thinking about it. I don't really care that much. But I really like it. Like I find it to be probably the saving grace of luck tokens, because otherwise I would be staunchly in your camp. Mm-hmm. And just, I'm not quite there yet as far as luck tokens are concerned. And I want to talk about number of players at the table, because that's also a huge situation here, right? But what are your thoughts on that? Are you feeling kind of similarly to me that you like it, or is it too fiddly? And, I do feel like we have to remind players of it more often than I would like.
Yeah, it is a little fiddly just because it's a if-then situation. And we have a little bit of a stack going right now with the natural ones causing layered effects that they can also damage weapons. Like if you roll a natural 1, there's a -1 damage to your weapon. That your weapon's dinged, it's pitted, it's cracked, it's something. You need to go get a new one. Off you go. Can't do it to magic weapons. It's a minor. I genuinely feel like that one's such a minor tax that it's a economy of the world inconvenience that adds some texture, but otherwise I don't care. You can't, if you fumble, you have failed, is really one I like. That, like, hey, you have fumbled, you failed, and you can turn off the catastrophic failure on a spell, but you still failed. You still have lost the spell. That there has to be a chance that spells fail, because what happens, and you mentioned the number of players, is if at a table with 6 players, 5 or 6 players, that's 5 or 6 luck tokens. And anytime there is a miscast, miscasts go out the window. Like that's effectively what happens, is you will never see a miscast.
100%.
It would be so unlikely that you get all the way down to the end of a session and somebody throws a 1 and there's no luck tokens at the table or whatever it may be, that it takes that mechanic out. And it's a shame, because it's a really fun mechanic of the magic's dangerous and it sometimes can go wrong. Compounding that with and I'm going to have to focus on this spell, and I could miscast my focus and deal with all those repercussions. All of that, I love that set of rules so much, that the roll to cast, now I Wizards play the same game everybody else does as a player. You roll a d20 and you add something, and that's my game. And I have to deal with consequences of cheating at the world. I just lock and unlock doors on an 11 plus, whatever it may be, that I have all these spells at my disposal, that ability to break the world, that's why I like the rule so much that we've adopted of, no, even if you roll a 1, you lose the spell at least. Like that at least has to happen, because what we saw was just miscasting and failing spells just wasn't a thing. Or if it was a combat heavy day, that the priest was just, forever, everybody's full hit points forever. And the stakes dropped so much. And I think what's hard, and that I want to get your thoughts on, when it comes to fiddling with luck token rules and fiddling with how many luck tokens am I giving the table, I think it's two things. On one hand, it's vibes. Like, what are the vibes you want? And that ultimately led my decision making. But on the other hand, there's some really dramatic kind of mechanical implications to the luck token. And man, when you adjust that rule, you feel it. Like the vibes feel different. And when you adjust the luck token rule, it matters. For folks thinking of tweaking these rules, I guess I'm like, man, it's a tough one because it's an on-off.
Yeah, so here's where I think luck tokens work. So we talked about this actually when we were talking about spellcasting, that a session of about 4 hours, where it's an open table and you're going to the dungeon and coming back, and at the beginning of the next session, you will have all your spells. That 4-hour dungeon crawl feels pretty good in terms of the arc of spellcasting. And I would say that maybe implicit in that was the luck token rules, because for all intents and purposes, our players, even though they quote unquote have to pay for luck tokens, they have to pay 50 gold at the beginning of the session. Everybody saves 50 gold for a luck token. That's how good they are, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of part and parcel for what you're talking about. So I think one thing I'm interested in is we're still playing 4 to 5 hour sessions. And it'll be interesting to see what that arc looks like without starting with a luck token. Especially since we're going to be ending in the middle of those games and potentially in the middle of an adventuring day wherein wizards and priests don't regain their spells and rangers don't, get their herbalism abilities back. Well, that begins to change the calculus quite a bit. And one thing that I think is very interesting about luck tokens is the exact thing that you're talking about, which is that they get saved for spellcasters and they get saved for cure wounds and for avoiding miscasts. Like ultimately, those are the two things that I think you and I have been trying to solve for quite a bit, is how do we get a fighter to use a dang luck token for something that they're trying to do? Like, it happens not with alarming irregularity, but it doesn't happen very often. And so one thing that I'm interested in trying is your luck token is your own, and everybody gets one at the beginning of the session. But I don't know. I feel like that, I guess it's just because it's an unknown. But one thing about the luck token rule, like you said, is that any change you make will have effects on your game.
Yeah.
100%. And there's a part of me that's like, man, I don't know. It's the one rule, funny enough, that I'm hesitant to change, because the game is, what I'll say is, already feels and looks on paper like it's hard enough for the players. Now, you and I both know that there's lots of things GMs can do, and the mechanics of the game suggest that it is not actually as deadly,
right,
as it looks on paper. But even though I know all those things, I still feel it as a player. So I don't know. That's a big jumble of ideas that you can think about and respond to whatever way you want.
One of the things that jumped out to me in there that I think is really important is that 4 to 5 hours arc. When you're dungeon delving and you're fighting and you're exploring and you're doing all those things, yes, that's true. In our Dolmenwood games, which are heavily narrative, right?
Yeah.
We have had many sessions where we end and there are 5 or 6 luck tokens that never got spent. They just sat there the whole night and nobody used them. And we played for, 3-4 hours straight and never touched them. Maybe used one, and we do use them on kind of more role play-y things in that game. They aren't reserved for exclusively our priest or our whatever. It still has that nice heightening sense of when the rare occasion we do run out of them, we're like, oh, hey, we're out, y'all. We need to be heads up. Everybody's out. So, there is that piece of, in a more narrative world. Yeah. And I do want to lean into the narrative. The Saltmarsh Saturdays, it's going to take some time to build up to that narrative. I would like the narrative to grow more organically. And I think that's worth noticing, though, is that what's the environment of your game, not in terms of vibes or setting, but are you spending time chatting with NPCs? Are you having are you having shopping episodes? We're traveling between places and what's happening and who are we meeting? And I would like to work on both my own skills as a GM around some of those things of the let's play in the world live role play. And then I think the mechanical stuff will take care of itself. So I think that's a really important back and forth to consider that's a piece of this. And the other piece is I feel like I'm like belaboring this point, but it's heroism. Like the luck tokens translate, if I had to give it a name, is how heroic do you want folks to feel like they are? And that's, that's just as a GM, where's your barometer on a scale of the Avengers to the old sitcom Green Acres? Somewhere in between there is, it was a pastoral comedy drama.
No, I just,
Yeah, for the 2 other people who got the reference. But like somewhere in that range of Little House on the Prairie to the Avengers is your characters. Where do you want your slider to land in there? And the luck tokens, like you said, in our experience of like learning the system and playing with it for a while, and it's not as deadly as we think it is, as people act like it is. And the perceived range of how deadly is Shadow Dark and how desperately do you need luck tokens versus the actuality is pretty different. I think there's more. I think it's probably the one area there is the most misconception about Shadow Dark is the lethality, and that luck tokens are tied into that is kind of a drag for me, honestly.
Well, okay, let me push back, because this is the one thing that I actually think is of, I don't know. This is the thing that I'm actually interested to see, because you run a fairly combat-heavy game, and there are certain circumstances where we're not going to, like, there will be a combat encounter. And so I am interested to see if this way of playing affects that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when, and again, I don't know, and I'm interested to kind of hear your thoughts on this or see if you've made adjustments, because, we haven't actually talked about this other than right now, which doesn't always happen, but is kind of interesting, and or certainly interesting when it does. And I'm just wondering, we had a combat encounter in particular that had like 3 waves of enemies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a set encounter.
Mm-hmm.
You had that basically set. I'm assuming that it was a part of a table or something, but I don't really care. It happened, and those guys were going to attack. There wasn't really anything we could do to dissuade them unless we maybe spoke reptilian but like given our party composition, you knew they were just gonna attack.
Right.
And if I'm wrong, you can let me know. But like in that circumstance, that to me feels like an argument for luck tokens for a couple of reasons. And you can respond in whatever way you'd like, because the way that Shadow Dark is supposed to work mechanically is not based on set encounters like that. That's not the ethos in which it lives necessarily, as far as I can tell. And additionally, the game is not lethal because of that, because it is largely based on random encounters and not these like set piece combats that are going to be like linked together. Like I think I will start playing the game more with the mentality of the like hyperbolic but still useful combat as a fail state mindset. That's where I'm going to be living for the most part in these games. And I don't know if is that what you're looking for, because that's the one thing that I know for sure that I have internalized is, okay, we don't have any luck tokens, which means combat is actually now a bad idea, and we should avoid it at all costs. And I would be a little frustrated, frankly, if I had combat foisted upon me and not have an opportunity to avoid it because of that. And so that's the only place I can see friction.
Yeah, and that may come to pass. It certainly did not in our game. Well, it
helps when you roll a bazillion natural 20s.
It does help. Also that, as a GM, foot on the gas, off the gas. It happened because you rolled a bajillion 20s. I didn't need to fiddle with anything at all. You guys blew through that encounter with relative ease. But you appropriately leveraged, it's a big moment, I'm going to grab a big spell.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if that spell had failed and I had rolled a natural 1 and I had no luck token, that could have been that could have been a TPK, like fully, right? And I'm wondering like how, because of the swinginess of the D20, right? And let's, we have one session as a data point, so I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I'm just thinking about like thinking forward, because the D20 is such a swingy, or has the potential to be so swingy. And if the party's dice run cold and there is no way for them to mitigate that with luck tokens, and we can't, and you like to have your players roll, like that's a part of the way that you run the game, and we can't avoid combat encounters because there are set piece encounters and there's things that are going to happen. I'm just wondering if that's going to find a way to catch up with us in a way that's going to be like, where was our, not our agency, but where was our mitigating factor? Like if we couldn't avoid the combat encounter, we also don't have any luck tokens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I can see the scenario you're creating.
And you just don't think it's going to happen?
I don't think it'll happen with regularity. And I think there's an amount of preparedness that can be taken on. I also think your GM brain is
totally
playing in here big time.
Well, because the show is called Dungeon Master Diaries.
It
Jody.
is indeed. But no, I want to be clear that
I haven't thought about this until we sat down. It wasn't like while we were playing, I was like unpacking this.
Oh, that's good. I genuinely was starting to get a little worried. I was like, oh man, this was a big deal.
But I could feel myself working towards that combat as a fail state by the end of the session, for sure. So that part's true.
And so, yes, one of the questions you asked a while ago was like, have you adjusted for this? Yes. Like, just full stop, yes. Does that mean you will always have the option of opting out of every combat? No, because one, I would hope as players you would never do that because it's just really boring. Like one of the great joys of playing a fantasy adventure game is you can solve problems by hitting them with a sword.
But what I mean by that is like, should we be thinking about setting up every combat like the combat as war? Like, do you think that as players we should be trying to stack the deck?
I haven't seen that to be necessary.
Okay.
Frankly.
Okay.
The number of combats I have seen as GMing Shadowdark that get to that escalated point are relatively few. Like that, even when you're out of luck tokens, even when things are winding down, the characters tend to be pretty good at what they're good at. That if you are leveraging your strengths as a party, and I am putting a premium on that, like no two ways about that.
Yeah.
Anybody else who's like, oh, I like this really gritty, like difficult mode, then your players need to be clear that that's what you're doing. I will go double. Super clear. I was going to say I'll go quadruple check my messaging that it's like gritty frontier, hard living, you blah blah blah. So that I am trying to lean more into the generative. So we'll be rolling up encounters and this and that. I knew that encounter was well within the scope of from ranging mostly second and third level characters. You guys should, and who knows dice, but should be able to cut through this pretty easy. There was one there's really only one thing that I was like, this is scary. Everything else is fine. And you guys dispatched it very quickly. The one really scary thing. I think you recognized the scary. So it is a metering of, I just, over the years of running it, the number of combats that have spiraled in that way, even in our Sunday dungeons, are really few and far between. That I don't have evidence. Is it possible? Is the scenario you're setting of like a combat shows up, you guys have very limited luck tokens, and things spiral really badly because of some bad rolls, and you're like, man, we really didn't have much we could do there. Yeah, that could happen. That is, but it's the top of the show when I was like, it's a risk I'm willing to take. That the trade-off for me of air quotes earning luck tokens, going and like looking in the world to find them, which is not something I telegraphed or explained, right? That isn't something I made a production about of like, hey, go look for luck tokens. But also knowing what the scenario was, there was an onboarding here I was doing too. Like that, hey, what is the vibe of this new thing we're doing? Make sure that all of the adventure hooks will provide that. So yeah, it is a back and forth. And I think this, again, I want to be really clear that the scenario you're presenting, I think, is possible. I think it would be irresponsible if I did it and I hadn't considered that the difficulty or lethality was up. Does that mean I want to entirely avoid combat or always give you guys an opt-out? No, like there's still going to be combats. I mean, literally we ended last session with you guys were tasked with you're going to go fight.
Well, I mean, but that we've opted into, right? And
the ambush, not so much.
The ambush, not so much. Okay, so, and the reason I was making a big deal of this is because I can see that for people coming from 5th edition, for instance.
Oh yeah.
Right. I know, or I don't want to say I know, but I've read into some of the commentary from people coming from 5e that are like, man, I killed 700 characters in my first session. Why did this happen? And what I see in a lot of those is, well, you transported a set of assumptions from one style of play and one game system to another that don't really translate. And that's not what I think you're doing because, well, we've had plenty of conversations about the differences. I mean, we did an entire episode on that, Jody.
I think we did.
But what I do think is of interest is I just like talking about the trade-offs. And I think, when it's a meta currency like this, it affects player behavior in a way that I'm interested to see what happens. Because it's impossible for either of us to turn off our GM brains fully. But I didn't think about this for a second while we were playing. And I've had to work on shutting my GM brain off when I'm a player. That's a part of like what I have struggled to do over the years, frankly, and gotten better at. But one thing that I did find myself just by sheer, not because I was thinking about it from a GM perspective, but just because I was thinking about it from my character is reasonably intelligent and understands.
Yeah.
From a character perspective, that the magic he is wielding is high stakes. Well, that means I'm going to be more judicious with my spells.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just be free casting. It also means, and I think this is a real positive, that magic finally becomes the thing that it always should be, which is dangerous and, if practiced by people who are smart and who studied the books like wizards, held in high regard for its power and its potential to destroy you. So that's, I think, you got where you were trying to go. But I was, while we were talking about this, thinking, oh, I wonder if trying to bend an encounter, if you're going to fight, you bend the encounter as far as you possibly can to make things good for you prior to it starting. Right? You try and do everything you can to leverage the environment and what you know about the world to give yourself a better leg to stand on. I wondered if that was something that you were interested in encouraging as well, or if that's just kind of tangential. So
not specifically, I think tangential, but I'm generally in favor of that, and also generally our play group does that. Like that's I feel like has become a normal, if
Sure.
given the option, our very extended play group with relatively limited exception, funny enough, other than our Dolmenwood group, will,
which is, oh boy.
yeah, literally had to cut off you as a GM recently and be like, can we please have a plan before we go running into this extremely dangerous situation? But most of our play groups, our Sunday sessions, we see it that like if they know what the danger is, the players will adapt and go like, hey, I see the danger coming. What can we do to mitigate our danger here? What can we do to prevent threat? What can we do to give ourselves an advantage? And I think that's fantastic. I love that stuff. And then, and rewarding a well thought out plan and, air quotes, letting the world punish a really poorly thought out plan or lack thereof. The second, sure. That's actually the more true is the world should punish lack of planning, not just a, weirdly assumed plan. I've never thought about this until this conversation of the luck token being, for me, maybe you brought up the 5e modern D&D port over problem of like, and it is the tough onboard of bringing, and we see it all over. If you've read about people reporting about my group is playing 5e and then they played Shadowdark, almost always it ends in they had a great time. They're looking forward to the next game. And what happened in between, we're trying Shadowdark, they had a great time, and we're looking forward to our next game, was a bunch of player characters died. Why, as you said, and the why is a misalignment, just like you said, of the 5e players going, we're heroes. We go stab things, and that's what we do. The luck token is the slider. If I was specifically wanting to onboard somebody, I think I would be like, yep, luck tokens all the time. Here's lots of luck tokens, so you still can feel heroic. That's another piece, and the reason I bring all that up and rehash it is I've also onboarded, I think, fairly reasonably all the folks who are playing in this now ongoing campaign setting is that's not the vibe. Those are not the vibes. The vibes are harder than that. That the world, though not the game is going to be hard, but like the world is harder than that. That you are not the shining paragons. You are not the coolest people in the village. Like there are other people who can do things and that are busy doing bigger things than you. That's why you're doing these littler things. That yes, you can make allies and friends with them, but they have their own things to be doing. You're going to go do other things that adventurers do. And we are deep in the world of experimental here. I'd also, that's not a great thing to tell players. And I wasn't aware of it kind of to this degree. We're thinking about it now. But even if I were, I wouldn't have been like, we're going to heavily experiment with luck tokens, because then that opens up the debate the whole time and you don't get a true sample, right? Like you wouldn't be getting a true sample, and we wouldn't have organically found out that when you were, using a wand to cast a high level spell that requires focus, you're like, hey, it looks like the guy is dead. I'm going to drop the spell then. I'm not going to finish turning him to stone because I don't want to risk it. And I thought your justification of my wizard's smart enough to know what's happening in the world is valid. And sometimes the luck tokens suck for that, frankly, of why that got a luck token. The number of times I have as a player have not spent a luck token when I'm like, no, my character would. Like if my character had the option, they would have spent their luck token.
Yeah.
And they just don't. And that's always like, player me feels great. Character me is like, that didn't feel great. That was dumb.
Yeah. So my last point is that nominally this is a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games. So I want to talk about Deadlands and I guess more broadly speaking, the Savage Worlds system in general. But talk about Deadlands because that's the game I have the most experience with. In Deadlands, there are these things called bennies, which, is short for benefits or whatever. And these bennies are much like they are in Shadowdark. They're a meta currency, and they allow you to do not just re-roll rolls to try and achieve success, but they allow you to do a whole host of other things. They allow you to basically get up from dying and remove some conditions. They allow you to spend them in multitudinous ways that can affect everything from initiative to your character's status and whatever. So they're extremely useful. And they're also extremely plentiful per the core rulebook. They are meant to be spent and given with reckless abandon. And so when I came to Shadowdark, that is how I thought about luck. What I like about the way that they work in Deadlands is that because the economy flows so freely, players will spend them on the dumbest crap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want out of luck tokens.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I love about our Dolmaway game is that players will spend them on these ridiculously stupid role-playing moments that I love. What I think is interesting is when things like luck tokens, these meta currencies, flow more freely, players are trained to use them on things with more like reckless abandon. And I don't know if this is going to be the case, I might end up running a game using pulp mode. I'm going to run a level 10 one-shot. And what I'm interested in is like maybe we don't do it in that session, but I'm interested to see when you get to the really heroic parts of Shadowdark, meaning you're playing pulp mode or you're playing level 10 or maybe both. Does that actually, because the luck tokens flow more freely and you can have more of them, does that maybe mitigate some of this? I don't know. Probably not. It definitely doesn't make the game feel gritty. But does it alleviate the problem of those luck tokens only ever being spent on just a few things? And so that's for me, that's something I'm interested in. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but is there anything that you would like to see luck tokens do like that? Or is there any way that you'd like to see them used that maybe you aren't actually interested in doing or that we just haven't tried yet?
Yeah, and I've floated this idea a little bit when we talked about the fighter, and I've yet to try it, but I would love to see a world in which there are freely flowing luck tokens. I mean, this is classic single-use potion that a player character finds. Here is my potion of gaseous form, and I've kept it for 10 levels, and why?
And they never use it.
And they never use it.
Because it's never the optimal place to use it.
Right. And luck tokens at the one luck token per person to start each session live in that world, unfortunately. Each person has their one, and then, like you said, it's very scripted. So I'm like, let's open the floodgates. I would say yes, and to your idea of like, what if we just had tons of luck tokens? I don't think I want to play a game where we just keep the rules as is, but everybody gets a grip of luck tokens, because I'm like, okay, so you never fail at a roll? What I would like to see is new things of like, hey, if you spend a luck token, you can do some bananas heroic thing and you don't need to roll for it, and you're going to get all these benefits on the other side. Like something where there is an incentive to have other classes leverage those tokens for massive cinematic effect. And then yes, having a free-flowing economy of them or one or two per game. I would love to see something like that of, hey, you want to attack, you're a fighter, and I want to attack everybody around me. I want to attack, literally, I'm swarmed, but I want to attack them all. Okay, spend your luck token, you attack them all. Done. That's it. Like, go. Oh, I'm a thief, and I want to slit this guy's throat. Sorry, that's very grim. But, like, I want to actually, like, try and do that thing. Cool. Spend your luck token, and you are now, you can do this amazing thing, and you can do your one-shot superhero thing. I would love to try that, where the luck token creates a bananas cinematic moment. And I think that's really, the over-under on luck tokens is this notion of how big do you want to go with them? And they live in Shadowdark as written in kind of this safe place.
Yeah.
And I have gone the other way, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been like, oh, we're going to make them, I'm going to turn their value up to a millizillion. And yes, they're only going to get used probably for these one or two things, and they'll get reserved for that. Okay. Then now the goal is, can we get them so we have those get out of jail free cards? Like, we're going to go look for get out of jail free cards. I think it would be rad to be on the other end. And I mean, after 2 years, I'm not sad about the just start every session with a luck token. I mean, that's default, and it works great. It's like, here's one for everybody, go.
Here's the last little wrinkle. and this is something we probably should have started the show with, but we allow multiple, or have allowed multiple rerolls as long as there's luck tokens. I will almost certainly, in whatever games I run in the future, not do that. And this is a kind of a new development. I have long been on the side of, if people want to spend their luck tokens and just pile onto a roll, great. However, I have been convinced that allowing multiple rerolls is, first of all, can get a little bit silly, especially with 6 players at my Dolmenwood table. But it can also create a situation where you do actually just ensure success. And there isn't like enough rerolls, and you're going to get a success more than likely statistically. So if it's you spend a luck token, you can only ever spend 1 luck token to reroll 1 roll. And then the luck tokens flow a little bit more freely. Everyone starts with 1, and we have Bless, and we have a Bard. Then I'm cool with it. Everyone can still have only 1 at one time, and you can only ever use it to reroll a roll once. And then in addition, we lock those natural ones, and they can't be rerolled. Well, then you have a situation where, all right, maybe we're approaching a third option that's kind of maybe in between what you're talking about and what we're doing right now. And I'd like to try that too. I might hate it. We might hate it as a play group. It might actually split the difference in a way that's like totally unsatisfying. But that's another kind of wrinkle to just throw in there. And I think this is the cool thing about luck tokens, is that they are a way to change the vibe. And I don't know. That's where I'm at. However, I think we're going to push our luck if we keep talking about this, Jody. So let's hear from a sponsor and come back and wrap up the show. Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you by our old friends. I mean, Jody, these folks have been with us since the beginning. You know them. You love them. It's Me Dungies. And Jody, these are the premium underwear that crawls through cracks not up yours. These underwear will keep you from chafing, even in the most dire of circumstances, when you're running away from rabid ghouls through the halls of the Barrow Maze, or running from a nasty crookhorn under the eaves of Dolmenwood. Well, it's not a problem. And Jody, you, my friend, you've been wearing Me Dungies for quite some time, over a year now. And I think you've changed over entirely. You're a Me Dungies convert, are you not?
I am. At first it was the comfort and the freshness that I appreciated. But now that I'm spending a little more time in the saddle, it's the padded undercarriage that I've really come to enjoy.
Well, that is a new development in Me Dungies' arsenal, and they are expanding their product line now to include lots of different underwear lines for different settings. They feature protection from the Shadow Dark itself. Don't get caught with your pants down unless you're wearing Me Dungies. All right, Jody, thank you to our sponsor, and let us bring this topic into the light with our core takeaways from this discussion. Jody, why don't you start us off?
The vibes, my dude. What's going on? Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Vibes. Luck tokens. Where do you want them? Right? Like, how do you want your vibes? I'm opting for gritty. I'm opting for grinder mode. I'm going, hey, players, life's hard. Deal with it. What do you want to cry? Or do I want to be like, you guys are amazing. Lightning bolts out your butt. Go for that. That'd be lots of luck tokens. So, just think about the vibes. Luck tokens factor in.
All right. My first core takeaway is that you should spend luck tokens on useless crap because it's fun and funny. And you know what? Just full send it. Spend a luck token trying to steal that completely useless little knickknack from the vendor in the street. It has nothing to do with the quest that you're on. It's just funny and it's just fun, and it's worth way more than the life of your companion
or your own character. And you know what, folks? If your players were more willing to just spend them on useless trivialness, I wouldn't be going through all these hoops of trying to figure out ways to limit them. So I'm changing stuff, and maybe think through the changes before you make them, or talk to one of your players, as we just did live on the show, about the implications that it might have that you didn't consider. Not that I didn't. I definitely did all of that. So, change it or don't. But, what I would say is give it a try. You're not going to hurt the game by giving something a try. If it turns out that in a couple weeks we're talking about a TPK because I ambushed the party and they had no luck tokens, I may consider changing this rule.
My last one, Jody, is that you should save your luck tokens for when they matter. Do not spend them on frivolous stuff. Save them, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're out of luck tokens because you did something really dumb and you spent it on something that doesn't really matter when the life of one of your fellow party members is at risk. And so I think my core takeaway from this show is that you should save your luck tokens and spend them only on cure wounds or when there's the possibility of a miscast, because everything else is just frivolous.
That's a great call, Matt. Both those points, can't argue with either one of them. As the torchlight grows dim, we hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod, all one word, @gmail.com. And you can also reach out to us via YouTube or Facebook, or best of all, on Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadow Dark Discord channel. You can find links to those feeds and any other materials we referenced in this show's episodes in the show notes. Until next time, are you feeling lucky, punk?
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not associated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shyrock RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023.